Lucia Simonelli is an Italian-American whose upbringing instilled a great appreciation for public services, such as public education, public transportation, public parks, and more. Born in Landsdale, she has lived, traveled, and worked around the globe before settling down in Quakertown. Politically, she has worked to make change both inside and outside of government, from serving as a scientific advisor in the U.S. Senate, where she worked on energy and climate policy, to organizing with Upper Bucks United's Indivisible chapter. Now she is running in the Democratic congressional primary in May for a chance to unseat incumbent Republican Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick. Hi, Lucia. Welcome to The Signal.
Hi, Cyril. Thanks for having me.
To start off, where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
I was born in Landsdale, raised there for a time, and then my family moved around quite a bit after that. So we moved to Texas, I moved to Maryland, DC, lived abroad for a time, and then returned to this area now I call Quakertown my home.
And you returned here as an adult?
Yes.
Great. And you went through the public school system?
Yes, always went to public schools. Yeah, I think public institutions generally and public services were a key feature in my family's life, in my life, certainly. My father immigrated to the United States in the 80s. We lived in Landsdale. My parents worked wage labor jobs, and slowly, over time, really, I felt this. Public media was a huge presence in my life. Public libraries, SEPTA, parks. Whites Road Park was, we went there daily. My father went to Montgomery County Community College and then used public transport to get to Temple. This was just such these public services were such a feature. And then I went to public schools, public universities, always.
Where did you end up going to university?
I went to University of Texas in Austin, so I'm a Longhorn.
And then I read that you eventually got a PhD in mathematics.
Yes. So again, University of Maryland, public school, got a PhD in mathematics. In STEM fields in particular, offer small, but, enough to live on stipends when you go to graduate school. So this is really an amazing thing for people who can't afford to, take out loans for higher education. And so, you're paid to teach. So it is a job, but it enabled me to be able to pursue a higher degree in mathematics, which was, I'm so grateful for that opportunity.
And as a result, you ended up teaching math around the world. What countries did you visit and work in?
It was such an amazing experience. So after I graduated with my PhD, I did a postdoctoral fellowship experience through an institute of UNESCO, which was founded by Abdus Salam, who was a Pakistani Nobel Prize winning physicist who recognized that talent is equidistributed around the world, but resources aren't. And in particular, there's such a global South, global North divide in terms of resources for education and science. So he created this institute to really bridge those worlds. And what I got a sense of, not only because within the institute itself, it was just a microcosm of the whole world, but also through outreach activities that I got to travel to, but it was just that also scientists are diplomats. There was a diplomacy aspect of this. It was mostly focused on emerging economies, countries in conflict. I traveled to regions like Latin America, Western Africa, the Middle East. In particular, one instance stood out to me. In 2018, I was in Tehran teaching mathematics the very day that Trump pulled out of the nuclear deal. And it was such there was a lot of ruckus outside, a lot of anti-US sentiment, but inside the classroom, we were building these interpersonal and professional relationships and really hearing from each other as humans in a way that broke through not only the media that wasn't entirely, objective there, but also me recognizing that the media here was not entirely objective about the realities, and in particular, the history between our countries. And I think that was such a foundational experience to me as this unofficial ambassador, for both science, but also the United States. So yeah, that experience was phenomenal. What an amazing institute.
Had you traveled much before that?
I had traveled. Well, my father's family is all in Italy. He's the only one who left the country. So I did have the good fortune of visiting them. So that, I had spent time abroad previously, and yes, but never so globally.
Did it change your perspective about the United States, the world, and the United States' relationship to the world, traveling to these different regions in the global South?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, just to learn about the United States' influence in, for example, so many regime changes around the world, covert and otherwise, there is a sense of how much we've meddled also for special interests, not for morality, which I think when we study history in this country, there is this American exceptionalism that is really ingrained in us. And I think it was important for me to understand that we have really affected so many people's lives around the world, and not always for the better. That was incredibly important for me to see, but also for me to see that not out of arrogance, but out of reality, just the United States is such a powerful country. And so our engagement in our democracy and our civic engagement is so important, because a decision of an American is a decision that affects so many people outside of our borders. And that was really, that was really profound for me to realize. We don't all have the same footprint in this world.
So print, digital, TV, radio, and podcasts, a combination or all of the above. Where do you prefer to get your news from? And can you just name a few outlets that you turn to consistently?
Yes, I prefer print, but I think, as almost anyone in this day and age, it's a little bit of all of the above. I would say I'm going to go to digital, though, for one of my favorite outlets, which is Democracy Now! I really like Democracy Now! In particular because it provides a more international coverage, and I think fairly objective international coverage in a way that represents sort of the stories and the realities that I felt when I was visiting these places are more faithfully conveyed. So that would be a top one.
I feel like Amy Goodman's just been around forever, right? Like I remember
fighting the good fight. Yeah.
So how did you come to the decision to run in the Democratic congressional primary for a chance to square off against Republican incumbent Brian Fitzpatrick?
Yeah, not a small decision. Well, I guess I found myself in, as many of us, in the situation of being in this potential, swing district, maybe. It's presented as such, although the, margins of past elections haven't necessarily felt like it was super close congressionally. It feels like an existential election for our democracy. I think many of us realize we have to flip the House if we want to take any sort of power back, and it has to be now. So I felt like I needed to do what it took to do that in this place, in this time. And then, realized that there are a lot of elements to what it means to flip a district. And I think one of them is a healthy primary. So I think if we look back at the past election cycles, one thing that feels missing is a really good, productive, issue-based primary season. And that is something that, in this moment of time, to beat an incumbent as strong as Fitzpatrick, who has also support from Democrats, I think it's about building energy and building momentum, engaging people who feel disconnected, disenfranchised, maybe a bit disillusioned from establishment politics. So a primary season, I think, is this really important part of the democratic process that serves as a laboratory space to test different ideas and also strategically mobilize as many people as we can. I think that each candidate in this primary can reach a different subset of our district, whether that's demographically, ideologically, but also geographically. I'm in Upper Bucks County, which is not often, we don't get that much engagement. And so I think it's really a time to have as many boots on the ground and even make each other better as candidates so that there's a stronger unity after May and we are the strongest campaign, whoever that is, to face Fitzpatrick. That's one thing that is really important to me. The second is that there are issues that I fundamentally feel misaligned with. And I don't, this is not trivial to me in that there are issues like healthcare, there are issues like climate change and the way that energy policy has played out in this state and in this county. I think we see the data centers here. That is, for me, a manifestation of what is our order of operations? Where are we placing? When are we putting communities first? When are we putting special interests first? And this is the story of climate change. And I think these are really fundamental. And I think the third issue is foreign policy. I think my community is not defined by the borders of PA-01. So if I think about my community locally and globally, foreign policy is critical. And if I feel misalignment with a candidate, that's important to me, even if there's a D after their name. So that's, primary importance, issue importance. And then the third category is I'm qualified for this job. I've been working in federal policymaking for the past 7 years. I worked in the United States Senate writing energy and climate policy for Senator Whitehouse of Rhode Island. So I also, bring an experience that is relevant to this job description.
Before announcing, had you been involved in local party politics or political organizing and activism outside of party politics?
No to the former, yes to the latter. So not involved in the local Democratic Party, but I helped to lead a local chapter of an Indivisible group in Upper Bucks. So we've been, for the past year, mobilizing this community through events like protests, community coffee chats, but also we are hosting community listening sessions. So to hear from people what concerns are top of mind, what people want to see in a political party or in a candidate, just to really put our finger on the pulse of what the community is thirsty for. And I would say that listening piece is so critical right now, because I think we cannot assume we know exactly where everyone's coming from. And it's been personally quite a journey as well, because sometimes it's easier to start having those conversations with people you don't know. And my family, who lives in the Montgomery County portion of this district, is, always votes Republican, voted for Donald Trump twice. We generally don't talk about politics intentionally because it has led to very ugly rifts. I didn't talk to my cousin for 2 years, or we didn't talk to one another because Iran came up, which is, so it is. But I've realized I have to put it in practice even in those most uncomfortable spaces right now, because not only is the division a weapon to sort of maintain sort of this power structure that we're fighting against, but also because there is this moment and this opportunity to capitalize on the fact that there's growing awareness that it is a power structure problem. It is this system that rewards the oligarchs. It is this system that's keeping us down to keep those, keep that concentration of wealth and power in place. And that paves the way for so many conversations that might not have been possible before because they were framed more as party divide. So able to talk to people about, able to talk to my MAGA family about universal healthcare right now, able to talk to them about climate, and because you can connect the dots to utility bills and the fact that, we're adding data centers to the grid because we are capitulating to a big tech timeline versus, I think community first energy infrastructure. So I think there's this avenue to really talk about issues and tie it to the power structure that opens the door for conversations that might not have been possible in the past.
What would you say to critics who might suggest that you should run for a lower office first to gain experience? I don't think that's necessarily necessary, right? But there is an argument that can be made, that maybe you should have run for state rep first before jumping right into a federal congressional seat.
I get that question all the time. So yes, that has been a theme. And I think there's many ways to run for office and trajectories. I think it's certainly one way is to, run for office in this very sequential order of jurisdiction scope. But I think in my context in particular, it's not that I have this ultimate goal of being an elected official or running for public office or wanting to hold power or increasing levels of power. It was sort of an artifact of this moment in time for a job that I've been doing. So I don't know, for example, Pennsylvania state politics so much. I've not worked in that legislative process. Every legislative process, every policymaking process is different. So I am, in my mind, applying for the job I have the qualifications for. And, the role of a congressperson is federal policymaking. And I really fell in love with that. Our federal legislative process. It gave me hope, and it's something that I've been working on and would like to continue contributing to.
Yeah, and I will note one of my favorite Congress persons or Congresswomen is AOC, and she never held political office before being elected, so it has happened.
It can happen, yes.
Exactly, yeah. So what sets you apart from the other candidates, from Bob and Rob and Tracy?
Well, I'm younger. I'm a woman. Those are the obvious things. I think my experience. I think I'm the only one who's had federal policymaking experience. I also think I talk about different issues. I'm not saying there's total misalignment with all of the others, but I think I talk about climate change more. I talk about foreign policy more intentionally. These are things that are really important to me. And I think there is some policy misalignment with not all, but some. I definitely think we should be talking about universal health care and Medicare for all. I think this is a North Star that we as the party should be pushing for and being really upfront about right now in this moment, that so many people are suffering from our broken healthcare system and are open to bold ideas to fix it. And I think we should be talking about climate and I think as a party, doing a better job at connecting the dots to how intersectional this topic is. Like, it is public health. It is affordability, right? It is utility bills, homeowners insurance, flood damage. It's a question of domestic competitiveness and national security. It is about protecting marginalized groups, a history of frontline communities bearing the brunt of our industrial decisions. And it's also, this uphill battle against dark money and entrenched special interests. And so it is sort of, for me, more like a philosophy of policymaking, of being holistic in a thought process and being really evidence-based. And again, yeah, I think the foreign policy conversations, there's also a bit of differentiation among us in terms of how we view our role in global conflicts and global interactions.
Yes, and climate change could actually exacerbate global conflicts as well as just immigration and migration, as more and more climate refugees are kind of created because of our refusal to kind of help at least stem some of the worst consequences of climate change.
Absolutely.
Let's stay on this topic. So you worked as a scientific advisor in the U.S. Senate, working on energy and climate policy with the Senator Whitehouse. How did you get that position? And just can you maybe tell us a little bit about some of the work that you did, or maybe one or two instances of work that you were particularly proud of that you worked on?
Yes. So I got this position through a fellowship that is it's called AAAS, and this organization places scientists, people with STEM backgrounds in government, so across executive branch agencies and also within Congress, to sort of increase the technical capacity within these governmental bodies. So I was so privileged to be able to have this opportunity. And in the placement process, it is a bit of you choose, but they also choose. So I knew I wanted to do climate. I mean, it was something I thought I really want to pivot my career from mathematics to working on climate full time. This is the issue of our day. And so I really wanted to work for Senator Whitehouse, who is, in my opinion, the climate hawk of Congress. I worked there during Trump 1.0. So it was a pretty legislatively stagnant era with McConnell at the helm. And Senator Whitehouse could still manage to get climate things through and environmental policy through. So it was just such a master class in using our legislative process wisely and for good. And so some things that I worked on when I was there included, some provisions that ultimately ended up in the infrastructure and IRA bills, which was very exciting. These are some things where, like, this is a little in the weeds, but tax credits for either energy projects or projects that pool carbon dioxide directly from the atmosphere and store them permanently in different reservoirs. And another thing one cool thing was I got to help write some of the time to wake up speeches. So Senator Whitehouse used to weekly go to the Senate floor and give speeches about climate. He's also done this for dark money generally and its influence, its reach into both climate and the Supreme Court and the judicial system. So writing some of those and getting to go to the Senate floor when he gave them was such an amazing experience. And then the last thing that I'll mention, which is a bit tangential to energy and climate, but I think is so related to some of the breakdowns that we're seeing in the process is science and the lack of objective evidence-based advice that policymakers get. What I learned when I was in the Senate was there was kind of this doge of the 1990s, and it was called Contract for America. And it basically tried to cut government, but very performatively, as in not tactically, just getting rid of stuff to say they got rid of stuff. And one thing that they got rid of was, so the Congress also has its own agencies. And one of those agencies was a little think tank called the Office of Technology Assessment. And it was full of people like me who love tech and science, who would give objective information to Congress people and in an anticipatory way. So they'd say, okay, listen, AI is coming. These are the things we know about AI. These are some policy options you might want to consider in preparing our society for this emerging technology, or pandemic readiness, or climate change. So it was this really small group, but really, really important for creating policy, and especially creating policy ahead of time, which is really when we need it. We see too much reactionary policymaking. But this whole thing was cut because they wanted to say, well, we cut Congress's budget, right? And we cut this whole agency. We're being so resourceful. And what happened in the aftermath is that the kind of tech and science expertise was cut across the board through these support agencies. And it opened up the door to a lot more lobbyists and special interests, because Congress people and their staff have to rely on expertise of others. And when they don't have it in-house in a nonpartisan, objective, evidence-based way, they have to go to the outside. And who has the most resources to come to them with information? the big players, the fossil fuel industry, big tech right now. So I think it is like so inside the conversation about our process and dark money and campaign finance is such an important one because it shaped the system that we're dealing with. But there are these little interesting pieces, I think, of that puzzle that, this is also something like I've been working on the side since then, is to restore funding to this agency that's still authorized in statute, just not funded. So if I were elected, I would definitely work on the OTA.
I remember Gingrich's contract
Yes.
with America, or maybe On America, might be a little more appropriate. But
good, right? Preposition. Yes.
But I didn't remember, I don't remember like the minutiae and details such as what you just brought up. Did Democrats acquiesce to that at the time? Because I know Clinton kind of like pivoted the party to the right quite a bit with economic policy, as well as I think with the austerity quite a bit as well.
That's a good question. I don't know to what extent. I get the general feeling that there was a bit of like, if we don't push back on this, it looks like we are self-enriching, right? Because people hear, oh, Congress cut their budget. They think what's happening is that Congress people are getting their salaries and budgets cut. But in reality, it was, getting rid of these other things. So I think there was a reticence to push back against it because it looked like it was out of self-interest. So, but that's a really good question. I don't know to what extent there was, they were complicit in this.
Yeah. So you were just talking about lobbyists and special interests, and on your campaign website you write that corporate greed continues to pull us away from the fundamental principles that should govern our policy and politics. And I think what you had just mentioned kind of like speaks to that a bit. Can you unpack maybe a little more about what you mean by that, and then give a few examples of how you believe corporate greed and corporate power has corrupted politics on a policy level? I mean, I think everyone understands that maybe like with climate change and big energy, dating back like decades ago from, disinformation or suppressing the science around climate change, as well as their kind of like big reach in Congress. But could you also give a few other examples as well?
You mean outside of the climate and energy space, or even within that?
Outside of the climate and energy space, like how corporate greed and corporate power has kind of corrupted politics on a policy level and how we're suffering as a result.
Yes, I would say healthcare is a big one. I think that, there's big hospital, big pharma, big private healthcare, like all keeping healthcare policy restricted to very temporary, almost superficial fixes, because if we really mean we want everyone to have access to healthcare, that means a disruption of a system that's not in their best interest. And so I think we see that so fundamentally on both sides of the aisle, that these industries donate a lot, they control the narrative, and that's kept us from really fixing our healthcare system. So I think that is another big example.
So there's a debate within the Democratic Party right now with how to deal with ICE, which critics say, and I'd agree with them, act as an armed, masked private paramilitary force for President Trump and do little more than actually terrorize communities and harm and sometimes kill people, as we've seen with Renee Good in Minnesota, with impunity. Now, some in the party are calling to abolish ICE, while others kind of want to take a more even-handed approach, if you would call it that, by proposing legislation to kind of curb abuses and in an attempt to make ICE more accountable for their behavior. Where would you stand on this issue?
I don't think we need ICE, certainly not in its current manifestation. And it also is a pretty recent, it's not like we've had this forever, right? Was it 2003? We existed before without it. I think it has only served to demonize a group of people that are in fact incredibly important to our society, and foundational to our society, and has been leveraged in a way that is unfortunate and I think unnecessary. The focus should be taking all of these billions of dollars that are being put towards aggression and violence and redirecting them to actually make our immigration process better. And that will fix a lot of problems that people are seeing. I mean, I lived in Texas for a time. There are problems at the border. That's not, that is a reality. But the way in which we address them, I think, needs to be more about putting more resources and capacity into our immigration process so that we have the resources to vet people. We have the resources to streamline asylum applications. I think that there's a humanity that's missing. And I think ICE is really this representation of how we've sort of taken humanity away from this immigrant population that is, I'm the daughter of one. Like it's really appalling to me. And I don't think we need ICE in its current form at all.
Why do you think Democrats have kind of shied away from actually vocalizing and just doing more to, propose a more effective and humane immigration policy or immigration fixes to deal with this problem at the border that we have?
I would say that there was almost an agreement reached at one point, and it didn't fix everything, but I think there was legislation to improve a lot of things that I believe, Trump didn't want to happen at one point in time. So I think that there have been some pushes. I think it's also not a non-trivial problem to fix, right? Like it is extremely complex. There's not a silver bullet. It's also something that is, about funding. But I think to some extent, what I feel is a pattern in the Democratic Party is to let certain groups determine what we speak to and how we speak to it. And if something has been a stigmatized issue or a polarized issue or a controversial issue, the idea is let's just not go there. Let's not rock the boat. Let's not give the right any opportunity to sort of, it's almost this capitulation to the narrative instead of the intention to own it. And that's something I think is true even with immigration. And I think is true in healthcare. And I think is true in many instances. So it's just this pattern too of not just saying what we want and mean and care about, and this over strategizing or kind of over moderating how we say things and what we stand up for. And I think people are feeling that. I think people are feeling that from both parties to some extent right now. So I think this is a time where we can maybe talk about things exactly as we want to talk about them.
I almost feel like they're petrified by the thought of maybe some people are going to disagree with them, and that's just going to happen.
Yes,
right?
Yes, totally.
So let's pivot to foreign policy. What's your assessment of President Trump's foreign policy in his first year?
Oof, disastrous. I mean, it's bully. We're bullies. I guess we've always been, though. I mean, to be frank, I think I've disagreed with foreign policy from both parties. I think it's just been more overt right now. I think the way also that we're interacting with other internationally is just with a complete lack of respect and humility. We're aggressors and arrogant in a way that is also, I think, if someone's interested in, this idea of U.S. dominance or being the superpower or whatever, it's not even self-serving to that point of view, because ultimately it pulls people away. It creates a fear, a distrust. And I think what is really hard is once you break that sort of trust, you can't rebuild it, or at least it takes a very, very, very long time. So the damage that he's done in terms of our relationships is potentially irreparable. So it's devastating.
How should Congress do more to rein in Trump's foreign policy and at least serve as a check and balance?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, because I think it's often perceived like foreign policy is just the president's job, but Congress has a lot of power over it. They just don't always exercise it. In December, I guess it was December, they passed the annual National Defense Authorization Act, which is, I think it's telling because this particular legislative vehicle has passed every year for the past 65 years without being held up. So imagine all of the things that we can't seem to agree on or that Congress gets stuck on, right? Like healthcare or climate or all these things, right? There's always this tumultuous legislative process. Often things don't pass. The authorization for defense spending passes without fail every year. Like Congress people, I mean, there are some, but there's a fear to vote no on that. There's a fear to push back on this policy. And I think this is indicative of our prioritization as a society, or what it has been. That the NDAA that was passed is authorizing a record almost $1 trillion of spending to the Department of Defense or war, whatever it be now. And so within that, though, it's not just an authorization of funding. It also does determine a direction of foreign policy. There can be sanctions within this bill. It also, does sort of define rules around how we interact with military contractors. I think almost half of the DoD's budget goes to private contractors. So this is not about paying service members. This is about this agency that has never passed a full audit. So I think that having more Congress people that are courageous to stand up to this bill and what's in this bill would be incredibly helpful. I also think an interesting power that Congress has that they do not leverage is being able to halt or modify arms deals up to the point of delivery. So they can say no. They can say we don't want things, we don't want to send things there, or we need to put more conditions on when we send things places. So I would like to see more of that. And also right now, after the kidnapping of Maduro and the strikes on fishermen, and now Greenland in the crosshairs, like Congress is the body that declares war, just Congress. So it's time to also for Congress, I think, to hold that power and to check the power of the executive branch in the way that it should and was meant to do as the first branch of government.
Are there any other issues or topics that you'd like to talk about that I haven't brought up so far? Anything about your campaign that you want to?
I'd like to talk.
Sorry. I was just going to say anything about your campaign that you want to kind of showcase or accentuate.
Can I have two answers? One is a topic and one is about the campaign, or is that too much space?
No, that's perfect.
Okay. One thing is science. I mean, I have to say that Congress has restored to a large extent, or seems to be restoring to a large extent, the science budgets across agencies. But I just want to point out that the dismantling of the scientific enterprise in the sense of science as a public good is very dangerous, because people in, National Institute of Health, National Science Foundation, NOAA, DOE, all of these people are people that could have been making a lot more money in the private sector, but they are using their qualifications as really committed public servants for science for a public good. And the consequence of firing these people and defunding these enterprises is that the jobs that they can find now are in the private sector. They are in big tech. And once you redirect the scientific enterprise from what is best for society to what is best for the profit margins of big tech or, corporate interests, that has really profound consequences. So that is something that is concerning, doesn't feel always so tangible, but feels very dangerous. So I wanted to just call that out. And then in terms of the campaign, this is a grassroots effort. I have a full-time job, as do most people on my team. We're doing this in a way that I wish was more the model of how campaigns are run, because we're not influenced by anything except our conscience and the will to try to elevate important issues and bring about good change. And it's exhausting, but it is a commitment to really living our values and doing what we say. And I am so appreciative to all of the people that are jumping in, and we're exhausted, but we are motivated and energized. And I'm so grateful. It is such a solidarity I have never felt before. And it brings me hope that whatever the outcome, we are going to be able to make some impact on this process and talk about really important issues. So I just want to highlight the team effort. Yeah, it's a wild ride.
Yeah. What's your voter outreach going to look like over the next few months as we approach the primary? What type of events will you be planning, not just in Upper Bucks, but in Central and Lower Bucks as well?
Well, I hope, first of all, with the other primary candidates, we're definitely hoping to continue our series of town halls, so that across the district. I think that is really important because, as I mentioned before, every time I have had the opportunity to talk, for now it's been mostly with Rob and Tracy, I feel like I'm able to articulate things better. I learn from them. It helps me recalibrate. It's also an ability to really show people what the differences are between us, strengths. And so I think those are really important for us to continue. We would also like to hold more issue-focused events. I think sometimes so that we can dig down into, I like policy. I'm in this because I believe in the potential of policy to make the real systemic change we need. And so I think having events where we're able to talk about a single issue, to connect the dots, bring in other people who are more experts, right? I think this is also about listening and learning, because as a policy maker, one doesn't know everything ever. So it's also this opportunity to talk to people who are working on things locally or have this expertise and learn from them, and tie, the policy interventions to things. So I think we're hoping to do events like that and continuing the listening sessions. I think just hearing what people are experiencing right now and what they want to see is so important for informing our campaign, but the larger movement.
And if people want to contribute or get involved with your campaign, how can they do that?
They can visit Lucia for Congress. So Lucia is Lucia, luciaforcongress.com. There's a contact form there. Please, send us a message. Let us know if you want to contribute in any way. We are happy for everyone and anyone to help out and pitch in. There's also a form on the website for you to tell us what issues are most important to you. So I think we'd really like to see what our community is, what's top of mind. And that helps us also just get a sense of what, to the point of, holding these issue-based events, what do people want to talk about the most?
Well, Lucia, thanks so much for taking the time to come on The Signal and to speak with us. Thanks for running for Congress and just for the work that you're doing in the community. The best of luck to you, and we'll be looking for you out in the community and to cover more of your events moving forward.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I want to just say that thank you to the Beacon. I think independent media has become a lifeline for many of us. So it is so important to have outlets like Bucks County Beacon, and particular to have one locally. So thank you.
This has been The Signal, a podcast by the Bucks County Beacon. I'm Cyril Migaleko, editor-in-chief and host. For more progressive news, analysis, and opinion from Bucks County and beyond, go to www.buckscountybeacon.com.